When Excel and when spreadsheets arrived, lots of that manual work went away, but it didn't make the accountant redundant. What it did was enable them to move away from that low value task and spend more time analyzing, what does this number mean? What's the trend? How can I represent this number differently?
Data today is a bit like, it's the commodity. It is effectively a little bit like oil. And this is where all of us, sit here, all businesses, and everybody's trying to understand how can I extract value out of that IP that I'm proud of.
Hi, it's Rob Brown here with the Accounting Influencers podcast. We speak to people all over the world that have something to say about the world of accounting, and we can't escape artificial intelligence these days. It is affecting all sectors of the world and all businesses. And we're thrilled to do a special bonus episode here with two experts that come from the Microsoft sphere of influence, and we're going to talk about Azure OpenAI. We've got Jas Brar with us, and we got Matt Quinn. Jas, good to have you with us. Will you just do a little introduction? Tell us a bit about you and your world.
Yeah, certainly can. Thanks, Rob. Look, great to be here. Really appreciate you inviting us. Microsoft, I've been around here 15 years nearly. I've lived in a few different countries, been based in Brussels, in Amsterdam, and I've also, during that time, covered the finance function within Microsoft, both on the commercial side as well as on the consumer side with brands like Xbox and Surface, as you'll hopefully recognize, and some of the audience out there. And so, pretty much did quite a few technology shifts over that time with Microsoft. And AI is just almost that next moment, although it certainly feels a lot faster than any of those previous sort of shifts we've seen.
Yeah, well, you talk about technology shifts. Accountants are not always known for their agility and their ability to pivot and embrace technology, but more and more it's inescapable. And we know that we speak to accountants in practice, accountants in industry here, and the finance function generally. They cannot get away from the technology. And Matt, you've got a deep history in technology too, haven't you? Tell us about your world.
So thanks, Robin. And look, so I've come from the Microsoft partner ecosystem for most of my life and joined Microsoft about 5 years ago. I used to build budgeting, planning, forecasting systems for kind of global companies, taking the technology that Microsoft provide and deploying that to solve business problems within our customers. And then recently joined, 5 years ago, joined Microsoft for a number of roles across customer success and then our solution specialism area, and more recently focused on as a chief data officer for Azure data and AI product.
So you're both well placed to speak into the accounting and finance function. Before we go into Azure OpenAI in detail, just give us an overview of artificial intelligence in the accounting and finance function, Jas. How is it changing the game?
Yeah, look, I think to what you mentioned earlier, Rob, as well, in terms of, agility, accountants and the sort of stereotype, what we are finding is, the push to go more towards that advisor type role within the business, to really sort of think about how do we steer that ship across the organization? What are some of the things that we need to tackle? What are some of the opportunities that are out there for the business? And so if we think about AI generally, I do think it's important to distinguish between traditional AI, which has been around for a while. So I think, there's organizations out there that are dabbling in machine learning, robotic process automation.
Matt was telling me it's been around since the 1950s in various forms.
There you go. Yeah. That's certainly, it's certainly fair. It has been around for some time. And, but I think the buzz right now is more around the generative AI piece, which is the large language models and the intelligent sort of conversations you can have with a sort of data platform that is not so much rule based as traditional AI, but really intelligent enough to think about what comes next, scenario plan for you, think about how you mitigate risk and provide solutions and options. So that's what's really got the imagination going at the moment, is the ability to go that sort of 3-4 steps ahead of what we've seen previously in terms of sort of more rule-based guidance or, models built on sort of predefined scripts and policies.
Look, very one-dimensional, right? Machine learning was typically very statistical, regression analysis, look at a trend and then project it forward, versus this more complex, kind of nuanced, context-aware AI that we have now.
And we have a phrase, what got you here won't get you there. And what's taken accountants to where they are right now is a set of tools, spreadsheets, if you like, shoeboxes, receipts, and then a new wave of technology coming in. But what takes us to where accountants need to go, which is, as you hinted, Jas, advisors predicting the future and putting business decisions around that rather than historically looking backward. AI is a game changer, isn't it?
It is. And I always used to use the phrase driving in the rearview mirror. Most of our reporting and analytics capabilities was always about looking backwards. How do we use this not just to project the future, like project a trend or look at an analytical piece, but how do we amplify the power of the human? As humans, we have the ability to understand so many dimensions of a problem. I look at a report and I can slice and dice that to maybe cut some trends and see what's happening there. But actually, could I use AI to look at more nuanced, more sophisticated patterns, to analyze bigger sets of data, to spot the trends that maybe I'm not thinking about, or maybe I'm bringing my own bias into that data about, I think this is driving that. Whereas actually the AI might look at a more complex network of cause and effect to see what's driving the number, and then give me the opportunity to inform the business on ways that they could change behaviors and take actions to change the outcome that we're looking to do. So then it becomes about, how do I plan? How do I drive a better outcome in the business, rather than do I just report what happened yesterday?
And for accountants in industry, they're running a finance team, they're serving the business, being accountable to the shareholders and the chairs and the CEOs and everything else. And as you are in your role, Jas, artificial intelligence is valuable for them to analyze the data and see where the business is going. For accountants in practice, they've got a portfolio of clients and businesses that they're looking after. So the accountants might be looking at after their own accounting practice to see how we can run more efficiently. But they've also got one eye on signposting good technology to their client. The average accounting firm now runs around 100 apps, software programs, technological platforms that they need to be well versed in. So yes, we can dumb it down a little bit, but there's no getting away from the fact that accountants are going to have to care about what's happening with artificial intelligence. They can't ignore it, Jas, can they?
No. And if you think about it, you mentioned there from a client perspective, you mentioned businesses, the environment we operate in today, Rob, I'd say is extremely fast, extremely, complex. If you think about what's happened over the last few years in terms of, some of the supply chain disruption we saw off the back of the pandemic, the economy sort of going up and down, challenges and other, geopolitical challenges. These are, external factors which make the job of an accountant tougher to predict in terms of what happens next. So just being able to sort of think about that from whether it be your client's perspective and how their business is evolving and changing, and how do you advise on risk mitigation challenges that may be coming in the future, and being able to sort of utilize, such models can really sort of help, put you at that cutting edge to be able to advise what comes next.
Well, when we think of the future, we often think of robots. And Matt, we're not scared, are we, that AI is going to replace accountants anytime soon?
No, you talked about Excel a minute ago, and I use this kind of narrative quite extensively. Accounting as a process used to be quite paper-based, right? It was quite an activity. I'm being overly simplistic here, but a ledger I write the numbers down and then I have to add them all up. If I change a number, I have to re-add them all up. Lots of manual, repetitive tasks. When Excel and when spreadsheets arrived, lots of that manual work went away, but it didn't make the accountant redundant. What it did was enable them to move away from that low value task and spend more time analyzing, what does this number mean? What's the trend? How can I represent this number differently? How can I look at it in aggregate? And I see the force multiplier that is AI enabling us to do the next wave of that. How do we remove some of the manual labor? It's not getting numbers out of a spreadsheet anymore. It's looking at a huge data platform of data sources that come from those 100 applications that the business might be using, supply chain signals, customer signals, market intelligence, bringing all that data together to analyze that, and using AI to enable me to connect the dots and spot the patterns, to build that kind of constructive model of what's happening in my business and what could I change. And, ultimately this is data and AI interacting together to turn that data into insights, into knowledge that someone can take action on. And that connective tissue between data and AI can't be ignored.
That's good. Jas, do we have any examples of how AI will complement the work of accountants rather than replace them?
Yeah, I think, look, it's really important to sort of not view these things as a bit of a black box, ensuring you maintain subject matter experts on end-to-end processes within your organization. I don't think that goes away. So in order to really get value from these models, ultimately you want to be able to train those models up and understand, what's at the heart of them. So I think, being able to have, as Matt says, a model that sort of sits on your data platform in an organization and be able to sort of ask simple questions in terms of, what's the impact for my net income if sales went up by 15% and expenses reduced by 5%? You could then start having a real sort of multifaceted response in terms of what are my knock-on implications in terms of suppliers? Do I change my strategy in terms of my cost base? So I would say, whether it be leaders or sort of, even more junior level staff, being able to democratize sort of the data and what it's actually telling us to be able to get to a decision faster with management. I think that's where you're going to see this move. Another example, Rob, might be, within the audit practice, we tend to have sample sizes. We may have a sample size of 10 out of 50, as it were, to go and sort of really, interrogate and check and ensure processes are working. With something like this, perhaps there's not a limit to sample sizes anymore, and you can really get, a good assessment of across the board. Are we missing anything? Are there any, risks coming on the horizon that we haven't spotted yet due to, capacity restrictions we can have in our sort of day, as it were, versus what, a model could probably crunch through in the space, an hour.
Sure. Matt, when I talk to accountants and ask them about AI, most of them think ChatGPT, and then you get to a few more entrepreneurial ones and they'll go to Bard and Gemini and Microsoft Copilot and lots of other things. Just give us a flavor of the ecosystem then, perhaps how Azure OpenAI fits into that.
It's a great observation. I think we've naturally gravitated towards quite specialized and maybe trained models that are bespoke to my organization and built on that data platform, that are, differentiating capabilities that an organization might build with something like Azure OpenAI. It's not the only kind of capability, right? We're all knowledge workers, and every day we get emails and we get pings on Teams and we have messages that we need to deal with and meetings that we're in. There is table stakes AI that I think will enable every knowledge worker to be more effective. That's the things like Copilot. I'm about to go on holiday, can't wait. When I come back, I know there's going to be 100 actions and meetings that I missed and a whole bunch of things. Actually, as an accountant or a salesperson or an engineer, whatever, I can come back to those tools and say, what's my boss been up to? And it can trawl through all the meetings that I was in, the transcript, the pings and chats that I'm in with my team, to understand what actions did I miss while I was away. And those are productivity things across the board, no matter what role you're in, that are going to be very, very relevant to enable accountants to remove some of just the day-to-day noise of being somebody who sits in front of a computer for a number of hours. Those kinds of efficiency gains will be table stakes number one. The next then is, how do I use things like Azure OpenAI grounded in my own organization's data, privately, securely, take our data, use the power of the large language model, which can understand context and language and generate text and understand and summarize things, bring that with our own private data. That might be contracts, it might be supplier data, it might be, actual numbers that are being crunched. And when you combine those things together to deliver that differentiated capability to query with the natural language understanding of Azure OpenAI, the model that powers ChatGPT, but combined privately and purely with our own enterprise's data, that's when you unlock the differentiated capability that's unique to your organization and can add that value, that kind of real pivot to the next level. I think that's where we're seeing organizations across finance, across supply chain, legal, lots of those functions are looking at how do they extract bespoke value from AI. And that's the next piece with Azure OpenAI.
And we're talking here, Jas, aren't we, about accountants are very risk averse. Obviously, they're in the business of managing risk and mitigating risk. And we're talking here about the difference between an off-the-shelf ChatGPT type thing that most people would know and something that's a lot more custom built, maybe for the larger businesses. Just talk to us about some of those distinctions and maybe data security and privacy, which accounting folks care a lot about.
Yeah, and maybe just start on that latter point. Look, I would emphasize you have to have the data sort of security, privacy at the core of whatever you do you cannot compromise that, especially in today's world that we operate in, and the risk that brings. So I think, that's something we take extremely seriously when we're thinking about, what customers want to do. Rob, I think you make a great point around the differences in terms of customer size, industries that they operate in, regulations that they have to abide by. All of that intend to then, start creating a bit of a picture around what you need to do from a bespoke data setup as an organization to meet, external requirements as well as internal requirements. But so I do think there's a ton of value in organizations trying to understand what Matt's point is around what does their data journey look like? How do they ensure they're safeguarding, what shareholders want to see, ensuring there's no sort of, risk sort of appearing within the organization. And I think that's where Azure OpenAI comes in terms of supporting that data platform and where they want to go, versus some of the off-the-shelf piece that we speak about and the ability to make people productive 9 to 5 or probably more than 9 to 5 in the jobs that we're all in, and ensure, that, it's a bit of a blur around, if you're sort of, off out doing the school pickup and then you're coming back and catching up on things and what are the key emails that you've missed. So there's an element of personal productivity versus also where, the function wants to go in terms of, that data platform and how it unlocks time to value. How fast can we make decisions to move the dial forward? We know, speed, tends to give you a competitive edge, but what you don't want to do is compromise quality.
And there's a lot at stake here, isn't there, Matt? With accountants, as the guardians of data, they have so much data at their disposal. They're representing clients. They want to be safe. They want to be compliant. And you put something onto an OpenAI platform, it's there in the public domain, isn't it? So you want something that's more bespoke, more custom for you, more private.
And I think that's a really important kind of, I guess, observational concern. And I always love the analogy, if something's free, you're the product. And, so when there are free services, obviously there's some value. Someone's paying for something to run this service under the hood. And I think where we've gotten very used to search being a free thing, the idea of querying data and like searching for a result, we've gotten used to that being a free, but it's paid for by adverts, right? So that's how it's monetized. Your eyeballs are the product that's monetizing that. When you look at that, similar things happen for some of these new services that are free to use to maybe have that interactive experience. But the price of that is your queries are being used to train that free service. With the Azure OpenAI service, is a distinctly different piece, right? So that very publicly trained model, OpenAI have built using our cloud supercompute to train that on all the publicly available information on the internet to understand language. What you then do is have a version of that read-only running inside your Azure tenant. So if you have a Microsoft Azure environment with us, that runs in a secure tenant boundary. When you feed prompts to that, it's stateless. We don't store those prompts. We don't use that to retrain the model. You privately use that. And the data you bring into that model, that you augment that model with, is your data. The same as if you store it in a database that we provide, that data remains yours. So there's a really different security piece here. You're buying that service from us, using it as a capability augmented with your data to deliver differentiated capability. And part of that Azure OpenAI service guarantee is we don't use that to retrain the data. It doesn't go out to OpenAI. We take a copy of their model and deploy it inside your enterprise security boundary for you and only you to use. I think that's a really clear, important distinction to make, because there is a lot of FUD around that, a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt around, is this just a public service on the internet and I'm feeding my data bleeding out of the organization? It's really important to define that. Create these secure enclaves where you can run trusted data platforms and use this capability for your employees safely with privacy and security at their heart.
Yeah, Jas, that's peace of mind for an accounting finance professional, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think you can ever get away from the word trust and the importance that needs to sort of be core to what we do with AI. And I profoundly believe we at the company really, really sort of push that and ensure when organizations are looking at AI, we're super transparent around, how we expect that to operate, as Matt says, how does that model work in theory? How is the data that, that organization uses protected, and not effectively sort of training other models, other products. So that becomes vitally important, because I think, Rob, data today is a bit like, it's the commodity, right? It is effectively a little bit like oil. And this is where all of us, sit here, all businesses, and everybody's trying to understand, right, how can I extract value out of that IP that I'm sat on?
When we look at the future, gentlemen, is AI a burning platform? Is this something that we're absolutely going to have to get on board with? Otherwise, we're going to be discarded. We're going to be irrelevant. We're going to be uncompetitive. There's no avoiding this, is there, Matt?
I think, the law of diffusion of innovation, right? There will be the early adopters who have to have the new thing. Like they would queue around the block the day the new phone comes out to be the first one to have it, right? And we've seen over the last 2 years, the first wave of those customers who wanted to embrace this, be the first with that technology. What we have seen, though, is that actually we're moving from those early adopters into the early majority. Some of the late majority is starting to come on board with this and recognize that there is a huge disruptive opportunity with this. And much like, I guess, the kind of wave of the desktop PC in the 30, 40 year ago timeframe, the wave of the internet 20 years ago, there is an excitement and a kind of anticipation about what this technology will do. There's some realities around how will we make this work, how will we govern this, and actually we've been working our responsible AI framework for 8 years now to help customers adopt this securely and safely and bring it to market. We're sharing that so that customers can learn from those lessons and accelerate their own journey. But there are some challenges in your organization that you need to overcome and understand. How will you govern this? How will you use this safely and securely? How will it change talent in our organization? What skills might we need that are different in our organization in 5, 10, 20 years time that we need to plan for? So what we're seeing is organizations start to recognize they need to train the organizational muscle. So as individuals, we can learn about this technology, but as organizations, how do we build this capability into our organization so that we can adapt it, adopt it, go from idea, there's something we could do to make the business better, to pilot that, and then get that out into the hands of our users who can put it to use every day, whether that's in finance or other functions. So I think that journey that we're on has got a head of steam, right? It's building momentum. It's coming. It will need data to fuel it. It will need process and governance and change management to embrace it into our organization, talent development to work out how do we enable our people to operate in a different way, to take advantage of this tool that's been being baked into organizations. So I think it's definitely coming. The momentum is building. I think the success for this will be when we stop talking about AI, we stop talking about the internet, right? It's just there. Right? I'm up in Manchester, Jas is in Reading, you're in Nottingham. We're just everywhere. We just take that for granted now. I think that's when AI has been really successful, when we kind of stop talking about it because it's just table stakes. And I can see the transition coming.
And Jas, you've got a foot in the technology world, but you're an accountant, you're a CFO, you're in this world too. When you look ahead, how do you see AI transforming the role of accountants and finance professionals?
I think firstly, you've got to embrace it in your organization in terms of your point, Rob, that there will be change, on the horizon. As Matt says, there'll be early adopters, there'll be people looking to sort of gain an edge, as it were. And I think, what I do find is that it's almost like a bit like a toolbox or a tool set, and things are being put in there that make your life a bit easier, going around the house, making home improvements. You're doing those with the wrong tools, it can take a long time. You're doing those with the right things at your disposal. Suddenly it can speed up, what you're trying to do. And I think what we'll find is, we will begin to start, accelerating that value that we're providing as an organization to the business. We will make that leap. When I speak to other businesses, other finance functions, everybody's talking about, right, how can I, move my team to sort of support the business more, that business partnership. And so ultimately, all of us, struggle with the time commodity as well. And that's what we want to do, is shift the dial. So you're spending more time thinking about the direction and decisions that need to be made versus crunching a lot of the data and teams have had to do in the past to be able to get to that point of decision making. I mean, I'll give you an example. In my early days as well, many times I've been on projects crunching big Excel spreadsheets, and I'm spending probably 90% of my time simulating 6 or 7 scenarios, and then I'm about to walk into a board review meeting, and I'll spend 10% of that time trying to figure out what I'm going to recommend. Whereas I'd rather flip that on its head. And that way, I'm more confident in, the decision we would want to make based on spending more time, getting to the root of different scenarios on the table. So yeah, it's really pivoting towards value and moving away from the crunching element that we all have to, I think, deal with in our role.
Yeah. Gents, before we close, I want to touch on the barriers to entry here, their obstacles. We've talked about trust here. Accountants are signposters of technology, but they want to be able to trust it, and they are hesitant. They have a lack of knowledge here. This is not their area of expertise. Tax regulation, compliance, things like that, they're really, really good at. But when it comes to technology like this, there is a lot of unknown. Matt, what assurances would you give to the accounting finance professionals that particularly something like Azure OpenAI is going to assuage, is going to make them feel like, yes, you can do this, this is safe, and you don't need to be a geek to weave your way around this?
And I think that's the main piece there is it's about democratizing this technology, right? It's that actually we don't need a degree in software engineering in order to go and start using these tools. I think the first one is to embrace, technologies like Copilot to really spark the imagination around what you can do. And what we see happen is when people embrace this, and there's a change management piece here around, when you embrace a new technology, spend 11 minutes a day doing it for 11 weeks and suddenly it becomes a habit. So like using Copilot, getting familiar with how do I ask it questions, use it baked into your office products, ask your IT team if you don't have it, like how do I get Copilot enabled on my environment? And when you start using it, it will spark imagination for the kinds of questions you can get, the kinds of insight. And that's the table stakes kind of piece I talked about. That's just over the day-to-day data that I have and I work with in my email and my teams and my meetings and things. That capability can get you started. And then you can look at partnering with perhaps your IT function or your chief data officer for what data do I have access to that maybe with a Copilot for Power BI or maybe with a reporting tool that I'm already using with Copilot baked in, I could ask it different questions. I can do more interrogative work. And then Azure OpenAI, the imagination is around what business problems going to solve. What repetitive tasks do I have? If I assess my business process end to end, what's the rate limiting step in my accounting process? Is it a budgeting process? Is it a finance process? Where is the pain in that process? That's a business problem, not a technology problem. How do I partner with my IT organization, with my chief data officer to say, what could we do leveraging this kind of capability to minimize this pain or to deliver an accelerated version of that process that would materially change end to end the pain in our process or the time to value in our process. So I think there is a business consulting thing here first before it's the technology problem. Why am I doing this? What problem am I trying to solve? And then work with technology partners, be that your own internal organizations or with Microsoft partners who take this technology, take the Lego bricks that we've used and help customers build a solution to that pain. That's where the real value comes from.
Jas, this is about accountants building trust and confidence in AI amongst their stakeholders, their clients who are all hesitant about the tech.
100%. I mean, but I think, you do that step by step. I don't think, you make that leap, as it were. And, if you think about the landscape as well, Rob, we have many partners out there who are, play the role of accountants, who are also advisors, who are also looking at how you can innovate in the field. So, we're not alone. There's a lot of experts out there that are thinking about how we bring the technology together with the functional transformation for accountant. And I think you'll begin to see, more and more examples, and an acceleration as we go through the next sort of few months and years.
Yeah. Closing thoughts, gents, as a call to arms, if you like. Matt, what would you say to the accounting finance professionals out there about what is coming up for them and how OpenAI with Azure and Microsoft can really partner with them to dominate the game?
I think that the first part is, knowledge is power, right? So a little bit of reading, and I'm not suggesting you go and kind of do some deep technical kind of analysis, but just think about the kinds of problems in your organization, understand the kinds of things that this technology is doing, try it out with a Copilot or those kind of tech, and think about what problems or opportunities you might have in your organization that would give you an edge. Like, where is their repetitive process? Where is their pain or insight?
You're talking about some kind of roadmap here, aren't you? And strategy, Matt, with this.
It is. And I always I'm a big Simon Sinek nerd. So, always start with why, right? How do you think about why would I use this technology? It's not technology for technology's sake. What problem am I trying to solve? What data do I have that I could maybe feed this thing with? And how can I then go about solving those problems in my organization? And there's help out there, whether it's reaching out to Microsoft, if you're a customer that works with our enterprise team, reaching out to our partners to understand, how can we solve this particular problem? But I would always start with why. Like, what problem am I trying to solve? Understand the art of the possible, ground it in that, and think about what business value could I deliver by doing something different to how we've done it before.
Yeah, thank you. Jas, final thoughts from you as a call to arms for our audience.
Yeah, I think I would just echo what Matt's saying. And there's sort of three elements always to look at with any sort of, change. And, for me, they go hand in hand. That's the technology, process, and people, so you can't look at one without the other. So, I think there's always opportunities that we are looking at, within our organization to sort of think about how we can do things better, how we can give time back to people. But that needs to be considered in, that sort of quorum in that triangulation between the three elements I mentioned. So, yeah, I do certainly think, we're at a time, you will see people embracing it. You will see people going out, learning about it. We have examples in my team where, they're interrogating the tool to learn a little bit about code, develop applications that we use in finance. And even over the last few years, you always tend to find sort of those champions within your organization, within your teams that go out and just go and innovate and start making things happen. So I think you need to find a space to allow them to do that. And then, as Matt says, you work across the organization through IT to bring some of that stuff to life in the mainstream, as it were.
Wow, that's been terrific. Matt, Quinn, Jas, Brar of Microsoft. It's been wonderful talking to you about AI generally, but particularly Azure OpenAI and how that's going to change the game for the accounting and finance function. Thank you so much for your passion and your insights today.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. Great to meet you.